So for everybody who is just joining, welcome. I'm Elizabeth Anderson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at the Digital Poverty Alliance, and we're delighted to have Matt Adam with us today. For those of you who are new to us and have perhaps joined the session for the first time coming along to a DPA event, the Digital Poverty Alliance was formed in 2021 and very much came out of the pandemic, which shone a massive light on the need to tackle digital poverty across the UK. We were formed by our parent charity, the Learning Foundation, coming together with Currys PLC and the Institution of Engineering and Technology. And our aim is to end digital poverty once and for all by 2030. We aim to do that by bringing together industry, government, both national and local, community organisations, the third sector, and indeed individuals, to look at solutions to creating a more digitally inclusive country. A lot of our work stems from advocacy and research, so looking at how we can create a big societal shift in how digital is perceived, including our belief that digital is now a basic right in the 2020s, especially following the pandemic and how so much and so many services have moved online. We also set out to help people who need support right now, who can't necessarily wait until 2030, who can't necessarily wait for strategies, be they national or local. So we provide delivery projects which are proof of concepts, and those aim to demonstrate how some of the solutions that we're working on can help different sections of society, and the benefits to being online in terms of outcomes around education, health, job opportunities, and so on. One of the big pieces of work we have coming up this year is that we'll be releasing our national delivery plan in the summer, and that will set out how all of those actors, whether they're government, whether they're industry, whether they're other charities, how they can help, what are the actions that we need to take on that route map towards ending digital poverty once and for all by 2030. We're delighted that Matt Adam is joining us here today. We Are Digital are part of our community board and therefore a key part of the DPA, Digital Poverty Alliance. Just before we go on to Matt, I am just going to say, do say hello in the chat, do pop in there who you are, what organisation you're representing, where in the country you are. We'd love to hear a bit more about who you are and why you've come along today. And throughout the webinar, if a question comes into your mind, do please put that in the Q&A and we'll try and come on to those later. But now I'm going to introduce Matt and ask him to talk a little bit more about who We Are Digital are.
Hi, thanks, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. Really good to see so many people. It looks like nearly 150 people. So thank you so much for joining. Really good to be here to chat. Yes, so for those that I haven't met before, my name is Matthew Adam. I'm the founder and chief executive of We Are Digital. I guess to just tell you a little bit about how we first started and kind of who we are and what we do. So the company was started pretty much 10 years ago, our kind of classic bedroom startup, you could say. And we had our 10th anniversary amazingly recently. So I had to pinch myself of how quickly that time had gone. Initially, the idea really behind the company was very simple. I say to lots of people now that there was no particular light bulb, no clever tech, no app, nothing like that. Really, it came from, at the time in 2012, something that some of you may recall, which was Race Online 2012, which was trying to get everyone online to before the London Olympics. And that was, I was inspired by Martha Lane Fox, people like Lee Smith, the chair of the DPA, a community board. So, you know, people that are still working in digital inclusion now. And at the time, there was this big push to get people online. I think we've all seen that that need is still there. At the time, this statistic was quoted a lot about 10 million people over the age of 50 having low digital skills or being offline. So I wondered if we could set up a network of trainers to help people around the country and go into people's homes one-to-one. I spotted a little bit of a gap, didn't really see that sort of existing at the time. And we're actually called Silver Training, was the first iteration of us, basically to do with Silver Surfers, as the media referred to people who were offline of a certain age. And since then, I guess, just very briefly, we'll get into it, I'm sure, but we've since actually stopped the general public training many years ago, and we moved into helping social housing residents, local authorities and government, basically helping their customers who are excluded in lots of different ways, whether that's with money advice and guidance, skills, digital skills, employability, getting into work. So we've basically morphed into what I would call other parts of community investment and welfare. And hopefully we can talk about some of that today. Just lastly to mention, because it's not always obvious, so we're not actually a charity, but we're a proud social business, which means that 100% of our revenue has to help people in need. We have social venture capital funds backing us who require a return in impact. So we actually spend a lot of our time measuring our impact, and we're not allowed to work on low impact programs. So in my head, it's kind of a modern version of a social enterprise. And we're really proud to have that profit and purpose mix, which personally I feel is kind of the future of business.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt, for that outline. And certainly that impact point is really important. I mean, as you said, Race Online was in the run-up to 2012. People have known for a long time that digital inclusion is really important, and it's not something that's just going to happen naturally by itself without lots of people coming together. And that measurement of impact is so important in a world where there are so many organisations really trying to crack this problem. There's a lot going on across the UK to tackle digital exclusion. What do you think can be done to bring those efforts together so that there is that cohesive nationwide approach?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that's one of the big things I think we wanted to talk about today, just how much is going on across the UK and sort of some of our ideas really for tackling that. So I think, I mean, everyone will know on this call, I can see from the chat, there are amazing organizations on the call that have done tons in digital inclusion for years and decades, really. You know, I was thinking about our chats with Emma at Digital Unite. You know, she's done it for 25 years now, I think. Good Things have been around similar amounts of time. So I think, you know, lots of people are addressing this and have helped huge impactful programs over the last 20 years. I think what we're we've noticed or spotted, I guess you could say, if you like, is there a slightly different way to bring everyone together? So I think we talk about joining the dots a lot. People like Freddie Quirk, I think I just saw one, he talks about that, and we fully agree with that. So I think before we get on to maybe a way that can be done, what I'd say is there are probably some areas of focus around sort of this cohesion of digital inclusion. So just to touch upon a few very briefly, I think coordination and collaboration is very important. It's one of the reasons why we joined the Digital Poverty Alliance. Working together, all these different organizations, they're big and small, some are for profit, some are not for profit, some are part of branded networks, some are independent, some give advice, regulated, some are not regulated, you know, all different geographies. So I think we're struck all the time by just the huge diversity of the network, as we call it, out there. But I think more needs to be done to bring them together more effectively. So we think there's a sort of community solution to a community issue, if you like. I think maybe more collaboration, public-private partnerships, so bringing together government, private sector, civil society. There's been a few attempts to do that before, but I think that's really important. Data and research is key. We think increasingly a business case that we're calling it, or an evidence case where we can actually show, you know, the question of why. And, you know, why are we doing this? I think more needs to be done on that. I think we all see the standard statistics that are out there for getting someone online and other areas of welfare. But I think, you know, we're looking to work with the DPA on this sort of evidence case alongside other great partners of why it's important, and actually bringing that kind of commercial view to it almost of why it should be done for the country. I think infrastructure, you know, again, these are fairly sort of obvious points really, but investing in, you know, high-speed internet and expanding digital amongst the communities, a lot of the stuff that the altnets are doing, and BT and Vodafone, lots of other commercial companies as well, and the telco firms. I think funding's a big one. You know, a lot of the delivery partners we work with in the third sector in the community talk a lot about that. But I think something that's often missed is, the large commercial organizations, whether it's retail, financial services, energy, etc., they're going through their own massive digital transformation programs. They're benefiting from that channel shift, from moving people digitally, saving on face-to-face call centers and so forth. So I think, can we do something that's co-designed with some of these larger sort of corporate organizations, because we'll all benefit from that digital transformation? And is there a sort of co-funding model, we're wondering, in a sort of build it and they will come way for the sector, where everyone contributes? I think that's really interesting at the moment. And probably lastly, I'd say transforming the customer journey. So, walking the talk, as we like to say, using all these skills to actually look at, well, what is the customer journey for someone that needs help somewhere in the UK? How do we make it easy for them? How do we analyze that customer journey, help them at the point of need? We're doing a lot at the moment with our sort of service design team and working with partners on how does it really work on the ground? Let's be honest about it, and let's look at how people can come through all those various stages. So I think overall, really, we're looking for a slightly newer way for a cohesive nationwide approach to address digital exclusion. And I think it will need to combine all those strategies of those points I've just mentioned. And I think maybe just to round that bit off, we also need to make sure the monitoring and the evaluation and the impact measurement is there, which, with our company is there by default, intrinsically in all the programs we run. But we think there's this new way to essentially bring all this great work together.
Thank you, Matt. And I mean, you said some of these are obvious points, but actually they're not always that obvious. And it's a really complicated set of factors that cause digital poverty. We talk about there being 5 determinants. Some of you on the call may have read our evidence review, which we launched in the summer, which was put together by Dr. Kira Altman, and highlights many of these same points, but it bears repeating over and over again how all of these different determinants come into play and interrelate in very different ways. And you sort of started touching there on the customer journey. Nobody wakes up one morning and goes, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to learn digital skills. So there's a lot to be done in terms of how we think about the user and preparing them for what they are going to face in the future with everything moving online. What do you think, Matt, are the gaps and the need at the moment for digital inclusion? What are some of the problems that we're facing with the current approach? You talked about needing a more modern approach. How can we tackle that?
Yeah, and I think a question just pop up on sort of the 5 gaps, I think someone said. So yeah, good question. I think, well, there's a lot I could say on this. You have to bear with me. I think the main problems, I guess, or sort of gaps in digital exclusion, I think now are quite well known. Because of the main determinants of digital poverty that the DPA have talked about. When we've looked back at research, what's interesting is it hasn't really changed in decades. And I'll go through some in more detail, but I think from the research we've done and also the programs we've run over the last 10 years, we sort of feel like sometimes at We're Digital, we're a bit of a sponge to see what works, what doesn't in lots of different areas of the UK with all of our great partners. So I think maybe rather than 5, initially I'd say that what we see is it often comes down to 3 main pillars. So skills, internet access or data access, and equipment. So we've often quoted for the last few years that the 3 pillars of digital inclusion are skills, internet, and equipment. We often find the best programs combine all 3. And what's sort of interesting, I think, is that rarely do you see programs that are funded for all 3. Most commonly, you find 1 or maybe 2 are funded, and the 3rd is kind of missing. But we've definitely seen at the coalface that the impact is greater if you combine all 3, albeit, of course, that makes it slightly more expensive. I saw a few partners pop in, looked like on the chat from Scotland, and we were just up in Edinburgh recently meeting the Scottish Government and SCVO, talking about the Connecting Scotland programme that I don't know if people came across in COVID, which won a lot of plaudits, was a fantastic programme set up at speed. The SCVO and great third sector organisations ran across Scotland, and that did provide skills internet access and data and tablets and laptops. And again, yes, it was expensive to run. Scottish government funded a lot of that, but I think the best programs often do. We have a program with Lloyds Bank. Again, it funds skills, data, and tablets. And I think if you miss some of those, that can be a big problem. As well, oh yes, just saw Eilidh is on. That's who we met from Scottish Government about that programme. So yes, if people want to look into how models like that work, I think Connecting Scotland is one of the best examples. I'd say moving on from that, so lots of there are other sort of sub-factors. So the three big ones are those pillars. I'd say also other sort of factors would be affordability, age, location. So quite a few other factors across communities at play would create other barriers. Quite a lot of people also talk about what we'd call market intervention, so legislation. So is there a gap where the government can basically do something through laws? Now, clearly, that's going to take longer, can be quite tricky, but just in the way that, the number of people smoking has changed when it became illegal to smoke in public places, or, mortality was reduced when it became illegal to not wear seatbelts, in car accidents and so forth. I think there is a bit of kind of talk and feeling that in the years to come, there might be some really big legislation sort of moves that government can make. I mean, I'm fairly skeptical about how possible that is for digital exclusion in the short term, just because of how fast that might not be. But I think examples of that may include things like, there's the Equality Act. So quite a few people talking about internet access as the fourth utility. Could that be a universal human right in the Equality Act? One that a lot of people often don't know is that there's an assisted digital mandate actually currently from the Government Digital Service, GDS. So for those that don't know, essentially what that means is that GDS is the government department that built gov.uk. It's one of the most used online platforms in the world. I think it gets about 5 to 6 billion visits a year because of multiple visits. To all of the pages. So, big system. It was held in sort of Silicon Valley as being one of the big digital transformation processes. Some people say it's almost too big now, and it's quite difficult to navigate. But essentially, GDS have decreed that any government department that wants to go digital by default, so that's tax, health, visas, legal forms, etc. So moving from paper forms to online, is not allowed to do that until they have decreed an assisted digital support service that supports those that can't or won't use that service online. Now, we run two of those programs, one for the Home Office and one for HMCTS, Courts and Tribunal Service, again, helping people with visa forms, with legal forms around divorce, probate, benefit appeals, and so forth. So, really interesting projects, UK-wide, including every home nation. Lots of great partners delivering that. But I think one of our questions here would be, is this being enforced enough across government? We find a lot of other central government departments don't even know that the framework exists for assisted digital. They're not aware of the other live programs running like Home Office and HMCTS. So we believe that we've got a bit of a job in the coming years to kind of, promote this around central government and show that there are frameworks, funding and mechanisms to help people with online services that are funded through central government. I think motivation as well, maybe just coming on to another few points on that one, Elizabeth. So I think that's a big issue. I think, I've always said personally that it doesn't matter if you're an organization in this world, it doesn't really matter if you've got £10 of funding or £10 million. Every program we've seen rises and falls on one thing: the quality and volume of what we call referrals. So basically users coming into the service. We've seen, examples of programs that have people queuing at the door and not enough funding. And we've seen the other way around, too much funding almost, and you can't sort of force people to come along. So it's a really tricky issue, I think, motivation. As you said at the beginning, Elizabeth, people don't just wake up and go, I'm going to go into a set 6-hour digital inclusion course today and get my tablet updated. That's just not the way the world works. We know that now through research. It's all about tailoring to the interest and the need of the individual, but how you get through to people in that way on the ground with the variation of different types of people across the country and the UK and differing situations they live in. Some people live in very difficult lives. So, there's a big crossover between money, digital, mental health, and so forth. So it's a big challenge, but I think motivation is a big one. So, it's the fuel to these programs. And it's a bit more challenging than we think sometimes. I think to get around this, one of our ideas is that we think you should provide multi-channel under one roof. So again, some programs you see are just over the phone, some are just in person, some are just down to your local centre. We're big believers in all of those should exist in one program. So video, phone, remote trainers, in-home, local centre, and go to where those customers need us. I think just allowing them one channel, like saying popping down to the local centre, albeit that's important. And we have hundreds of great centre partners. I think it's maybe slightly outdated to think that's the only way people can be helped. I think we need to put all of this under one roof. Just as one example to kind of make it more real, I think there's a resident that we helped through one of our money advice programs in L&Q housing, a gentleman called Barry, who we did a case study on. Now, when you looked at how we helped him, there's no way that he woke up thinking one day, I want to use WhatsApp to transfer documents. He woke up actually, which is what we helped him with. It's actually not the case. He woke up, feeling cold, trying to understand how he's going to pay his energy bill. And the route through to him was through some debt advice help, through debt consolidation with our partners in London. So digital skills were the enabler, but it was sort of meeting him where he needed at the channel of choice. And that became a game changer for him. And just lastly on this point, I'd say probably one of the most important parts is we think the actual methodology, so the method itself of the how, as we call it, how these programs are run, may need a new approach to the customer journey. So we think that needs a bit of reimagining about how to best help people. And that's where we're coming in now with a sort of new concept of building a one-stop shop. But I think, as I've said in talks before, everyone on this call will know that we've all been harping on about these same issues for a long time. I know we have at WAD. I've been to lots of conferences over the years that had similar issues. I think we're trying to step back now and think, is there a slightly different way of looking at it?
That's brilliant, Matt. Thank you. A lot of insight there, and definitely that sort of point you made at the beginning. It's not just laptops, or it's not just data, or it's not just support, or it's not just skills. People need everything. They need that complete package around them.
Yeah.
You can't learn skills if you don't have a laptop, but you can't make best use of a laptop if you don't have any skills. And the motivation piece is so important for people understanding the benefits to them around getting online and what that really means. It's not some mysterious, scary place where you might go and waste some hours surfing the net. Actually, most of the lives we lead, we need services which are online, and there's still that lack of understanding.
Yes, yeah.
You've spoken before about We Are Digital and how you operate like an airport. Can you explain a bit more about that analogy in terms of solving digital poverty and how you'd achieve that at scale?
Sure, yeah. So I think essentially we took a step back and tried to look at the problem sort of more strategically. And I should say, all of this feedback and this proposal we've come up with and what we're trying to develop, we're not trying to say, this is the only way. We're also not trying to say, we're necessarily right. Where this has come from has been the sector. And, 100% genuinely, we've done hundreds of meetings it's probably been about 18 months of work or so with housing associations, local authorities, central government, charities, corporates, lots of delivery partners out there, advice centres, libraries, community centres, citizens advice, etc. And we've really just been asking a couple of quite simple questions, which is, how does it work currently for you on programs? Where are the pain points for your customers? Because I think we have to be user focused at the end of this. And the one we always like asking, which is, if you could click your fingers tomorrow, what's the thing that gives you the biggest headache? What would you want solved? And what I found quite fascinating about this, because I've been, and we did this just last week, we went to see Leeds City Council, Sunderland City Council, Newcastle City Council, and then up to Edinburgh Scottish Government. And we asked them all the same things. And I think what we found is that in 99.9% of the meetings over these last 18 months, the same things have been coming out. And what's been really fascinating to us is that that's actually regardless of the welfare type of program it is. So we use the welfare umbrella to mean anything that kind of is for the good of society to help individuals in need. So it could be digital exclusion, digital poverty, could also be debt advice, energy help, mental health support, whatever it is. And what we found really was that there are thousands of delivery organizations doing this work on the ground already. So I think by the latest count, there's something like 24,000 third sector or voluntary groups of some kind that sort of we can have access to, or anyone could, that do these types of programs. So we actually wondered, well, perhaps the issue wasn't for us at We Are Digital to be, you know, another training organization or another advice center on that pile of already, you know, amazing organizations, but actually was there something different at play where perhaps it wasn't the work they were doing and it wasn't the output, you know, of the session with someone that was being held. Perhaps it was actually about how they were all joined up that was maybe not quite as efficient as it could be. And we wondered if we could help the sector, help funders, help users to join up more effectively, I guess is the easiest way of saying it, which we think would help each party. So we see it as what would help the funders, what would help the delivery organization, and what would help the end user. And when we looked at it and we asked these questions to the sector, we found there was actually a lot of the same inefficiency of how it was set up, how things were being run. And so that's kind of why we likened it to an airport, where we were saying, well, we want to build a better airport. We're not trying to fly the planes. We're not trying to be that next training company, that next advice center. It's a bit more of what someone called the other week, which I quite liked, a kind of a new operating system for the sector, which I thought was a good way of putting it. Someone internally kind of called it, you know, I wonder if this is like the NHS 111 service. And we kind of joke internally that, you know, could we build the 222 service for welfare and digital exclusion and so forth, where, you know, there's a lot of complexity underneath that, but actually to the end user, it's super simple, super impactful. You call one number, 111, and you get helped. Everything from referrals to the single front door, to triage, to booking, to integration, to all the amazing partners out there, to reporting, to outcomes, to everything else. That's all done underneath, and there's a lot of complexity, and that's what we're trying to build. But it's kind of like powering the sector, if you like, through a platform and a way of working that's a little bit different. And to our surprise, when we kind of looked at this with the sector, we found a few things. So firstly, we found no one seemed to be looking at it in this way, and no one was building anything like this, a sort of platform that could bring this together. I think secondly, all the types of welfare programs we came across, as I mentioned, so whether it's food banks or energy help or employability programs or digital skills, I mean, examples in Scotland were even transport programs and drug abuse programs. Honestly, every single one, 99.9%, if not 100%, all held the same components, the same aspects of this customer journey, and the pain points were identical. That was probably the thing that fascinated us the most. And that's when we got really excited. So hence the sort of airport analogy, this one-stop shop that we're looking to try and build, basically.
That's fantastic, Matt. And I think there's a lot of excitement about how that might work in the chat. And I can see lots of people starting to create their own connections, which is great. And hopefully, in a little bit, I'm going to talk about how you can also do that through DPA, or how the DPA can help you to get more out of that. And I think that airport analogy kind of ties in really nicely about building that hub for people who can then go off in the different directions and journeys that they need. You've talked quite a bit about industry and business and what they can and should be doing around digital inclusion, which is interesting because normally we tend to start off in terms of what government should do, and then we come on to industry as a second. What do you think government should be doing to further efforts to tackle digital poverty and digital exclusion?
Yeah, I think government can probably do a few things. So, we work with government at the moment. I think it can do a lot of good in this area. I think probably a few things to mention, a couple of things. So I think firstly, support, you and us all at the DPA, and our own organisations by, organisations or departments like the Treasury and the Cabinet Office partnering on things like the business case that we've talked about, this evidence case of how to think of things a bit differently and the reasons for doing it. I think, policy would be the other one that's talked about a lot. I've mentioned the Assisted Digital Framework and the Equality Act. I think being really clear and specific on the interpretation of some of these, big changes and what they mean. So I'm quite a big believer in social impact companies and charities, that one of the biggest reasons you see some organizations growing is often sort of strangely not the microeconomic things they do as an organization, but the macroeconomic things that are going on. In other words, like core societal problems to be fixed and the big policy changes that are coming in to assist that. And there's a lot swirling around currently in the digital space, especially that sort of thing at the moment. So just to mention a few of them, I'm sure a lot of organizations here are involved in this at the moment. So things like the current TV broadcast model is supposedly quite unsustainable, with terrestrial viewing becoming more expensive and everything's moving to online streaming. We did a Parliament sort of committee meeting recently with some of the telco firms and the altnets, which are these fast fiber companies, and the sector made a good point, which I thought was very valid, which is that actually these big tech companies and the streaming companies are actually the ones using all the bandwidth essentially for their customers, but they're not contributing to that data network and the cost of kind of increasing it from the telco. So is there something there where we can all come together again with these organizations that require it, and can they sort of help co-fund the system, as it were? Keeping with the telco theme, people may be aware or not that all phone lines on PSTN are going to become digital at the end of 2025, and there's going to be a sort of staggered switch off. So a lot of telco firms are talking to us at the moment about supporting their vulnerable customers and some of their older customer base that would still use phone and landlines, and how we can move them across to mobile and digital. One of the big ones we're looking at right now, which is going to be sort of very prevalent over the next 6 months, is so the FCA, which regulates financial services and advice organizations. The new Consumer Duty Act is coming in, which is basically going to force financial services firms to support their customers. Now, it's quite open interpretation, the legislation, but what we've seen, some of the main areas they need to support people with more is the digital journey and getting their customers online, but also vulnerable customers. And a lot of this is very related to the cost of living from what we've seen, and helping people with that. So, can these assisted digital helplines that we run and other support with help, banks, energy firms, financial services to support their customers using the Consumer Duty Act? We think that's going to be a real good mechanism for change, really, a really good catalyst. And then just a couple of others. So the NHS, obviously gets a lot of focus and is in the news a lot at the moment, but how can we relate health to digital? And there's a lot of talk in upending the NHS through digital. I believe every patient record is going to go digital in the next year or two. Big IT projects that haven't always gone that well previously at NHS before, but there's a lot of talk about the crossover there with digital and NHS, and I think not too much has been done in that area yet. So it could go on, but I think, every single government department has a benefits case now that I think we can talk about. And I think, again, what we're saying is we need a bit of a coordinated response. Seeing some of the stuff on the chat just coming through briefly, I completely agree. I think there's a huge amount out there. I think, mapping's being done, signposting's being done. There's brilliant consumer indexes from the likes of Lloyds Bank. There's the digital skills toolkit. But what the feedback we've been given is by the sector, and these are like at the coalface of helping people, is that, and this sounds a bit strange, but what we're hearing is there's almost too much support now out there. which is going to sound a bit odd saying that, but that's the feedback we're hearing on the ground, is that there's so much from national government, local governments, local councils, and they're brilliant schemes. And there's even more now coming out because of the cost of living support. But what we see, and I'm a trustee on our local village relief in need trust, which is absolutely tiny, gives 1 or 2 donations a month to in need families, but it's exactly the same there. People are quite confused about, well, where the hell do I go for help, basically, because there isn't a single front door. Do I go to my local county council? Do I call one of these national helplines that looks great? Have they heard about some of these other schemes? So I think, someone, an advisor the other day told me that, in her words, signposting often leads to more signposting. And I thought that was quite a good way of doing it, which is that, how do we bring the mapping and the signposting and all this great support and toolkits that are out there already? How do we bring that together in a sort of more joined up, connected way? So I think in the end, we've got to go to where people are for their, channel of choice and their point of need. And I think we need to join up all the great companies and organizations and third sector that are doing it. We do think this model, this platform we're trying to build to offer a single front door is kind of brilliantly non-competitive, because actually it's not competing against anyone. Unless someone build another airport, of course. But it's not competing against a training or advice center. It's really actually the other way around. It's saying more the merrier. Whoever you are, whatever size you are, whatever type of organization, come and join us. We want to plug you in. And we meet those incredible partners all the time. I think we just need to all put them into one place.
Yeah, and it is that bringing everything into one place that is always such a challenge. There is a myriad of different places to find training. There's a myriad of different places to go and see lists of training. And we know from Lloyds Bank research, it's that 67% would improve their digital skills if they just knew where to look. And even though some of the places to look are really easily findable, libraries really easily findable, if that's not where people are and it's not where people are looking, then clearly it shows us that it's a solution that could work but isn't working for a large number of people. So it needs something new to try and reach them where they are.
Yeah, exactly.
So all of that in mind, what does success and a positive impact on digital poverty look like to you?
Yeah, good question. I think there's lots of things, lots of successful metrics I think we would look at. And, this is I don't want to appear blasé about it, because I think some of the things we're talking about in this new platform to bring everyone together, I think will be a huge challenge that requires a lot of investment in resources, time, funds, and so forth. And we can talk a little bit about that later. But I think, we're under no illusions that we can see what I think needs to be done, or one of the big things that could be done. But we know, there'll be challenges to get there, and it's a big aim. We talk a lot here about BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. And I think it's like quite good for an organization and the sector to have, BHAGs and big goals, because I think it kind of strives us all forward. So with that in mind, I'd say a few different things in terms of what success would look like. So I think firstly, for the UK at large, increased access to digital technology so that everyone can participate. I think improved digital skills obviously means that people can navigate the digital world better. I think increased economic opportunity. We don't always talk about that. I think with digital inclusion, whether it helps people to access education, jobs, employment, entrepreneurship, many different reasons, monetary ones as well, savings, increasing income. I think improving social inclusion and social isolation is a big one. Lots of research to show the social inclusion sort of alignment with digital inclusion. So, helping people to connect them through society with all the information, resources, support they need to participate, and reducing poverty as well. So one of our biggest investors runs the Fair by Design Poverty Premium Fund, which is where poorer individuals, low-income individuals can pay more for services, which is, a crying shame, really, and we're trying to help with that. But I think digital inclusion can definitely help to reduce poverty by providing that access. to, increasing the ability to participate in the economy, basically. So, this is needed now more than ever. I think we all know that. We've seen statistics from, for example, the Lloyd's Bank Consumer Index, that people in the same job or same level of income can save more and be more in control of their finances by getting online. So we see it as a spider's web, I guess, Elizabeth, that there's so much interconnection between all these things: money, digital, mental health, and so forth. So, and probably lastly, I'd say on that side, civic engagement too. That would be a success factor in terms of increasing civic engagement. So providing access to all these resources means people can actually participate more in the democratic process. And, I think this will be needed sooner rather than we might imagine in terms of government. So, and then just the second side, the other half, probably I'd say in terms of success in this field would be in having a positive impact for us as an organization and how we can help the sector. So few things I'd say: firstly, providing a bit more of a joined up customer journey for those in need. So a central single front door for the sector. Sustainability. So this not becoming BAU, not sidelined, but, not a charitable one-off, not a sort of grant that, is never there again for the second year. This needs to become more of a mainstream issue and a core function in society. And we think that's why building something like this platform, this airport, will have longevity, really. And then lastly, for us, at least at We Are Digital, to increase social impact is one of our biggest aims. We have what we call a mission lock in our legal documents, which enshrines what we can do, what we can't do, what we have to go after, and the types of impact projects and high impact we have to work on. So it's a bit like a constitution of a charity, and this is what we live for: profit, purpose, helping people, and I really believe in this phrase. I think it's, to be significant, you have to be sustainable first. So that's sort of being, successful as an organization will lead to some of that significance in the sector. So I really believe in that. I think you need both. And this also aligns to the measurement side. So asking the so what question, as a head of community investment at a housing association said the other month to us, so great that all these people are being helped, but what was the real impact? What was not just the output, but what the outcomes are? And, I've talked in other sessions before about how we're trying to do that through measuring with social return on investment, SROI, which is a bit of a stricter, more realistic way of getting that real impact out of the work that we do.
Thank you. And I mean, there's an interesting debate going on the chat at the moment, but one of the points being made is that people aren't necessarily looking for digital skills, they're looking for real solutions to real problems. Do you have any personal stories that maybe resonate with you around digital poverty and ties into that?
Yeah, I think, in terms of sort of personal stories on my side, our side, I think, wow, lots of stuff springs to mind over the years. We've had some amazing sort of videos, case studies. I think we're trying to get our staff out and about more to actually see the people we help, because I think it's hard from head office sometimes to see that. And I know a lot of organizations on this call will be at the coalface. So I think quite a few spring to mind. I think maybe the most fresh in my mind, just in terms of I guess organizational stories, was probably our trip to the Northeast last week, where we saw lots of local authorities and led to the Scottish Government at the top of our geographic journey at the end on our train journey. And I'm glad to say, I think that one of the learnings from that was it was this idea of building a kind of central platform that can, run these programs end to end and plug in the sector. It was very well received. And I think, again, what just backed up our sort of hunch was that all of these organizations had the same pain points. And actually, they were looking and seeking out for this type of system, this type of platform to manage their community programs. And that wasn't just the digital inclusion side, but many other areas of welfare, any area of welfare, really. So I think on an organizational level, that was great. I think that backed up a lot of, what we were thinking. I think on a person level, the one that stands out, just one briefly, was Russell. amazing gentleman that we helped from the Lloyds Banking Group helpline that we run. We've sent a video around, because he gave us the consent to film him about his story, which is pretty amazing. So, we'll try and send that around if people haven't seen it, because it's very impactful. But essentially, he came in again through that, channel of need, through the bank, through that customer journey initially, and we helped him with digital skills, but it became more than just internet banking and his initial needs. It kind of changed his life, really, in his own words. And, very sadly, his wife passed away in COVID, but he was cut off from his brother in Australia, had to write letters, didn't contact him digitally at all, but we got him online. He's now FaceTiming using Teams, and had that connection with his brother, which was so important after his wife passing away. So, it's this thing again of so many different outcomes can come about after first helping people with digital skills. I think maybe just another one that I've always remembered is an amazing lady we helped through a sort of combo digital financial inclusion program with Orbit Housing quite a few years ago, where we did money management, financial education and digital skills. And we helped her to get back on her feet. But, she was in real dire straits when we first came in. She just lost her son. She was about to be evicted, high debts and so forth. And again, through our brilliant delivery partners, and we just managed the program, she got back on her feet. But what was amazing was it wasn't just getting her back to an even keel. She went a lot further once she was helped. So she started a wedding planning business. She won a local award. She kept her house. And this spider's web of things of how it affects people once you get online and get support was quite amazing.
Very inspiring stories, and yes, really showing and really hammering on that point that yes, it's not necessarily digital skills that people know they're looking for. That's something that sits underneath and then supports them
Exactly.
in the rest of their life. I've talked a little bit at the beginning about the Digital Poverty Alliance and how we want to bring together businesses large and small, government, national and local, community-based organisations, national third sector organisations, individuals. Digital poverty can only be solved across the UK by everyone playing their part, but hopefully the DPA can be more than the sum of its parts as we join everyone together. And a part of that is our community board, and we are digital. I'm a very valued community board member here at the DPA. We are asking organisations to make a pledge around how they are going to support our work. What is We Are Digital's pledge around that, Matt?
Yeah, sure. And I think I know that we'll need to wrap up after this, Elizabeth, to move to Q&A and so forth. So I think, and I just was quickly flicking through some of the chat, but I'll have to look at it afterwards because there's been some great comments. But I can see quite a few people saying about, the complexities of how much work is being done by different types of organization, how we bring that together, and also maybe one or two people asking what the actual thing is. So I thought I'd maybe wrap all that into this answer about a pledge, because it's kind of all related, and maybe be a bit more blunt about what we're trying to develop. So I think, so we are soon to announce quite a large investment into building this airport, if I just use that analogy, because it's kind of maybe the easiest one available. So we've raised, around about £5 million of social impact investment to basically majority build this airport, this platform. And so we're putting our money where our mouth is. We're really serious about building it. We want people to know, we're not consultants. This is not some sort of strategic thing that we want to, do more talking shops about or anything like that. We've already chosen our technology partner. We're about to close the investment, and we have a 9-month window this year where we're trying to basically get it built. Now, clearly, there'll be lots of different versions of it in the years to come, and we're not going to say we're going to solve everything in 9 months. But I think what I wanted to get across was that's our pledge to the DPA and the sector at large, really, is that we're cracking on, we want to do it. And really, if I guess at its simplest, just to answer some of the questions on the chat, I think if people imagine a 111 service for digital exclusion and or it's kind of the same thing, a 111 service for what we would call welfare. So, there tends to be 5 main pillars of welfare: digital inclusion, money advice and guidance, energy help, food, mental health, and so forth. We believe this same model that can help join the dots for digital inclusion can also do that for wider welfare. It's basically very applicable to the whole thing. So at its simplest, that is what we're actually trying to build, is a sort of 111 platform where that can be run across the UK and join all of this stuff together. Now, that can also be done very locally, that model. It can also be done regionally, across a local authority, combined authority, and it can be done at the sort of highest level in terms of central government across a country or the UK and all the home nations. So I saw something pop in. I thought, yeah, we're not always too obvious, and I didn't want to be too cryptic. So essentially what we're saying is that's our pledge. It's a tangible thing. So it's basically, if you imagine a platform that will do everything end to end for an entire program to be run under a one-stop shop. So basically, if you imagine, I was having in my head the sort of customer journey. So from, referrals in from all different places to someone being triaged, being booked and integrated into the local supply chain, whoever they are, big and small, different systems, we're going to integrate with them, and the third sector at large, and then all the way to being helped, tracking how that person's helped, support, reporting and impact. So that's kind of what it is. Happy to take questions at the end, clearly, if any of that's still confusing, but the idea is that can be a kind of managed overlay to join things together in the sector. We do think it's, one of our BHAGs, I said, big, hairy, audacious goal, but, it's probably not worth doing if it's not challenging, and we're really excited by it. And also, just to finish with, I'd say in terms of the pledge, we really want to co-create this with partners. So that's both, funders, clients like local authorities, NHS, housing associations, corporates, government, and also 100% delivery partners. So the third sector, centres, charities. We're going to be reaching out to many of you in the coming weeks and months, including the DPA board, about joining what we're going to set up as a sort of co-creation panel to feed in to help building this airport. We want to build it for the sector. And we're big believers in that. I mean, already just from last week, seeing the local authorities in the Northeast and the Scottish Government, we learned a huge amount about what they needed across their community, and almost, features, if you like, of the platform and how it can work. So we want all of that to come in. We're not going to guess. It's going to be built by you all, essentially. And that would be my sort of, last kind of request on that, I guess.
Fantastic, Matt. And I think that actually answers one of the questions that we've come in around, will you be seeking organisations to partner and help to shape and test this? By the sound of that, yes.
Yes,
Matt, I know your email address has been posted on the chat, so I'd say do reach out to Matt. Also, do join the chat room that's been set up on our community hub by Ellie to continue this conversation, because there's been an amazing number of comments coming through, and I'm sure Matt would like to continue it. I'd also quite like to continue it. It's very hard to host and run the chat at the same time, but I will take a look through all your comments later. So do join the community hub. I'm going to look to my colleague Ellie and ask her to put the link in one more time. She's just done that. She read my mind. Do read our UK evidence review. It brings together a lot of the themes that we've been talking about today, a lot of the themes that I've seen on the chat today, and quite a few more further insights that I'm really confident you will find useful and relevant in your work. You'll find that at digitalpovertyalliance.org. Do also get in touch with us here. So you can reach me at elizabeth@digitalpovertyalliance.org, or you can reach the team at hello@digitalpovertyalliance.org. We are really keen to always be developing more partnerships, joining more dots, whether you're a corporate and you're looking to find a way to support digital poverty activity, or a charity looking to be part of our work. We'd love to hear from you. We would also love to receive your data, your information about different services within your area. We are looking to build our support directory, which can become something across the UK, and the first of its kind in mapping what's happening across different regions, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, all across England. So please, please do share that with us. Do reach out and get in touch. And again, if you've got devices that you're looking to repurpose, or you're looking for advice around how you can support activity in your local area, and perhaps you're a larger business, do get in touch with us. We're really keen to work with as many people as possible. We'll take a quick look at some of the questions that have come through just before we close up. But as I say, do continue this conversation on the hub. So John has asked a couple of questions about how do we, how about the lack of continuing support for people, which proves a barrier to getting online or dropping offline? And also, how can we increase the confidence and skills in voluntary organisations?
Yes, I just saw those. Good questions, John. So I think, actually, it's just disappeared, hasn't it? But I think I remembered. Yes, so the continuing support thing, very good point, John. I think there's a lot of talk in like impact measurement circles about people are helped in the moment by the support worker, trainer, advisor, whoever it may be, teacher, etc. But which is great, and you can track the impact through surveys, distance travel, things like that at the end of the session or the course. But there's a lot of talk about, which I think is what you're saying, is but 6-12 months later, do they drop off? Is there, that's in impact circles and SROI, social return on investment, which is what we use as a measurement tool. That's really important. And there's a sort of attribution timeline, I think it's called. I'm not an expert on this, but where you can actually see, well, when is the drop off, and is it a month, a year, 2 years? And the only way to actually track that, which is tricky, but we're trying to do a little bit of that increasingly in our programs, is to do post-impact surveys, as they call it. So come in 3-6 months later and actually contact those individuals, phone, email, survey, meeting, whatever it is. And actually you can ask certain things that relate back to the initial data about, are they still using their skills? Have they had to recall, get another session in, whatever it is? So there's sort of ways to do it. I think it is tricky because you have to kind of make the program itself so impactful initially that there's the timeline of impact lasts quite a long time, and they don't forget the skills. But obviously people will require top ups and refresher course, things like that. So there's work to be done there on the post impact side, I think. On the voluntary side, just briefly, yes, it's a big thing we're looking at actually. So in this platform, in this sort of airport model, we think there's a bit, almost half of it really, if you imagine the user journey, is about the delivery network of partners that deliver the actual sessions and help on the ground. So half the system is sort of like the front end, how people come in, get triage, get booked, and then integrated to the supply chain, that all of yourselves, the partners on the ground. And we think that of that second half, the partner side, delivery partner side, it's really important to bear in mind the voluntary bit of that, because a lot of the programs we work on, yes, you're quite right, the organizations we use to deliver have in their own staffing structures normally paid staff, but a lot of volunteers. Siddons Advice obviously have a very successful model of doing that, where they can have hundreds more volunteers than they do paid staff members. But that needs to be managed, tracked, in a proper way. So, things out there like Digital Unite have a brilliant platform for champions and volunteers. But I think, yes, it's a good point. I think that part will always have a really important part to play. It also, let's just be honest, with funders can help in terms of funding, costs, sustainability, and other things like that. So really important to bear that in mind in the model, as well as paid delivery. And we always will consider both in the mix.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. We are bang on 2 o'clock on the hour. We will come back to the last couple of questions via the chat room on the hub. Do sign up there. Thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you, Matt, for giving us so many insights actually in such a short space of time. And I think there's some really good challenges and thoughts which have come through the chat, including around the language that is used in the sector, which comes up time and time again as being something that needs to be addressed. Do sign up for our DPA newsletter if you haven't already. We've got more events coming in February and March. Do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. There's been a few local authorities on the session today. We have a local authority session, which will be running in March, and I'm very sure that Ellie will be sharing details of that with you guys, because we'd absolutely love to have you involved. Thank you again, Matt. Thanks to everyone who joined, and see you very soon. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Bye.